Well, I wondered how long it would take, and honestly, it hasn't taken long at all, unfortunately. I keep on saying this time and time again. There are topics, there are topics that the left and people on the left are just not equipped to talk about. For whatever reason, they do not seem to want to go and learn more about a topic or understand what the consequences might be for taking particular actions, or to understand, well, okay, you might do that. What if that is done taken as a sign of weakness by another country to greenlight other actions they then might want to pursue later down the line, maybe in the same country as Ukraine, or maybe into other countries? It is constantly very, very worrying. And this is something we are have seen throughout all this conflict. It went very quiet for quite some time, but now it seems to be coming back with a vengeance, with the fact that we now basically have, you know, Russia and America walking into a room into Saudi Arabia and basically deciding um, what each one gets to carve up Ukraine. I thought we on the left were against this type of thing. But apparently in certain subsections, apparently not, which is very massively disappointing, especially in the light of what is amounting to economic colonialism, the demand that Donald Trump is making for basically permanent control of Ukraine's mineral resources, like in legal perpetuity. Again, I thought we were against colonialism and imperialism, but apparently not. Um, which, which again, we're going to go today. I expect there will be blowback on this. I fully expect to be attacked by people on this, but that is fine. Like I say, guys, if you want to get in contact with me, you want to have a talk about this on this channel or on yours, I am fine. I will gladly take the pro-Ukrainian position on this. But I don't think that's going to happen. Never seems to happen, to be honest. But there you go. So we're going to have a dive into this from a blog that has been written, and it is bad. But I'm pre-warning you all now on this. So as always, before we do go on into this, like I say, down below, Patreon page, buy me coffee link where you buy me coffee, YouTube thank you button, and of course, YouTube thank you button, and of course the Pony Club down below as well. So as always, let's crack on then into this, because this is bad. This is just bad from start to finish. This blog. So this blog is the Council Estate Media, with the title of "Neoliberals Would Prefer War with Russia to Peace in Ukraine." Well, it entirely depends on what this peace is, because there is such thing as a bad peace. And should you pursue peace at any cost, even if that peace is a bad one? This is really ultimately the crux of the person who wrote this doesn't, I think, seem to understand. So they begin. Unpopular politicians love war because it is the perfect way to divert attention away from their failings at home to whip up patriotic fever. This is the perfect excuse for them to introduce authoritarian measures and cement their control over a disillusioned population. I fear this is what Keir Starmer is doing right now. Really, is this person willing to tell us what, quote, authoritarian measures and what control is Keir Starmer going to take over the UK democracy? Is he about to somehow become a dictator because of this? Because that, my friend, is ludicrous in the extreme. That is a ludicrous statement to make in the extreme that this person cannot substantiate in the slightest. So the British Prime Minister is talking about taking a leading role in Ukraine's security. And again, good. We should be glad that he is doing that. You know, Ukraine security matters quite a bit, to be honest, on this. He is suggesting putting peacekeeping troops in Ukraine and boasting about he takes jeopardizing our lives very seriously. Well, yes, because you have to take these types of things very seriously, because what is going to guarantee any peace agreement here in Ukraine? I don't think this person understands, like, why you would need guarantees for peace agreements, because you cannot trust Russia. Russia has broken 3 peace agreements with Ukraine: a Budapest memorandum, Minsk 1, and Minsk 2. Why are we going to trust them if this is Minsk 3, or I don't know, the Trump deal, whatever? Anyway, it reminds me of when he cut the winter fuel allowance for pensioners to send money to Zelensky and then boasted of, quote, making tough choices. You're not making tough choices, Keith. You're just a prick. He never said that he was cutting the winter fuel allowance to send money to Zelensky. So that is, once again, a false statement, a false premise of that. Yes, money went to Ukraine, but nowhere at any point did anyone in labor or in the government say that that winter fuel allowance cut was going to go to Ukraine. That is, once again, a false statement, a misleading statement on that. So it seems none of his bluster has, of course, been remotely tough enough, though, because former head of the British Army, Lord Richard DeCant, told BBC Breakfast News, frankly, we haven't got the numbers and we haven't got the equipment to put a large force onto the ground for an extended period of time. Again, former head of the British Army. I don't know how long this guy served. I don't know how much you should really take him for granted on some of that stuff. But I think, yes, we could do that. I think we could put numbers on the ground, especially if it wasn't just us doing this, especially if it was a united peacekeeping, Europe organization putting forward these numbers of troops. I think we could do that. I think we could guarantee do it as Europe. We could guarantee Ukraine security. And even if it is only us, I still think we should go ahead and do it. I think absolutely we should go ahead and do it so that we can guarantee peace in Ukraine. But again, apparently this guy doesn't understand, why you might want, troops on the ground, regardless of whatever country they're going to be coming from. So Starmer has pledged $3 billion a year for Ukraine, a sum I would rather spend on bolstering our military than provoking Russia. Well, sorry, we ain't provoking Russia. Russia is provoking everyone else. Why is it always when we see people who do this type of thing, they never seem to acknowledge the fact that it is Russia who is the one provoking this? It is Russia who started all this. We are having to react to the things that Russia has done, not that we are the ones, poking Russia. It is Russia going like that to Ukraine, and then you are going, oh, well, if Ukraine, hadn't provoked Russia. Right. Anyway, this might surprise you. I'm sure I will be. But I am in partial agreement with President Trump that Europe should increase defense spending. Trump wants all NATO members to increase their spending to 5%, and Starmer wants the UK to go from 2.3 to 2.5. I personally think our defense spending should at least be 2.5, although 5% is a bit high. Well, again, depends where that spending goes, where that defense spending goes. I think that will be an interesting conversation about where you think that defense spending should be going, what it should be exactly spent on. We'll see if that ever happens, but I very much doubt it. While I am very much, of course, pro-peace, I do think every country should be strong enough to stand on its own and not depend on the US or anyone else for security. I am anti-war, not anti-military. Well, if you want to be anti-war, alliances like NATO are part of that, and that anti-war stance is to make sure that a country that is a lot stronger doesn't go bullying other countries. That is why you have these alliances. That is anti-war. That is a deterrent to war. Anyway, Europeans are, of course, talking like the US is abandoning them and Ukraine. Yes, they've got every reason to think that. We have every reason to think that that is doing, because that is what the US is saying on this. But the US position is not a million miles from theirs. No, it's not a million miles from theirs. It's not even close to what the European position is on this. And like I say, given the talks, this blog has aged like sour milk. The US has been talking about providing security guarantees for Ukraine, including more money and even the possibility of peacekeepers. Well, let's make that straight. That was the priority and what was talked about by the previous US government administration. The current US administration is talking about something way different than that. The talk of sending peacekeeping force between 30,000 and 150,000 troops to Ukraine, but even higher number, would, of course, be insufficient if Russia went all out. Are we forgetting that it has Oshunk missiles? Oh no! The supersonic missiles that everyone has had since quite some time, and that Russia debuted. Oh no! But anyway, the reason why you have those troops there in the first place is to be a deterrent. Because guess what? There's insufficient numbers in North Korea right now. If North Korea invaded, those American troops are insufficient probably to hold back a fully forced and determined North Korean invasion. But those troops are there to ensure that they act as a deterrent to North Korea. This guy doesn't. I think this is very clear to me. This guy does not understand deterrence, like why you would have this stuff. But there you go. Anyway, I like this. I can't see how a Western peacekeeping force could possibly work. Yeah, it's very clear you don't. It's very clear you don't see how it could work. Given now the rest's growing presence in Ukraine was precisely what led to the war. Growing presence? What growing presence? Like, what growing presence is he talking about in Ukraine? There were no weapons, there were no planes, there was nothing. So does this guy think that Euromaidan was a CIA operation? I think he might do. Anyway. And aside from anything else, we would struggle to fund such an operation. Are you ready for more austerity to send our troops to Putin's doorstep? Because I'm not. So if us not sending troops to Putin's doorstep results in a war further down the line, is it worth it? Because all of a sudden we're going to have to spend a lot of money to fight that war. And as you said earlier, you are not averse to spending that money on defense. A lot of that money you could actually spend on defense here by building up the capacity to provide jobs for people here in the UK. That would certainly help. But then there are other ways and other things that we could do. I'm pretty sure this guy would be in favor of a wealth tax. Would this guy be in favor of a wealth tax to help fund this stuff? I somehow think he might be, maybe, if it was put to him. So, as well as, of course, as security guarantees, the US has been talking more rigorously about enforcing sanctions against Russia. Well, given the talks that have come out very recently, we have every reason to think that might not be the case. It sent a 6-point document now to European countries asking their opinions on these matters. But Europe is now foaming because it won't be at the negotiating table in Saudi Arabia. That would be the same Europe that told us Putin was unwilling to negotiate because Europe didn't want to negotiate. Wait. Why are you believing? Why? Yes, because there was no guarantee that Putin would get what he wanted from Europe. Europe has been very, very firm on its position of what should happen in Ukraine, that Putin should not be rewarded for taking territory in Ukraine. Right now, what we are seeing and what has happened in these negotiations has this how high this blog has aged like milk, even though it was written less than 24 hours ago. This is insane. This is Europe would not cave to his demands. That is why Putin had no interest in and has no interest in Europe being part of these negotiations, because he knows Europe will not give him what he wants. However, the new Donald Trump administration in America will give him, apparently, from what we are at least seeing, everything he wants. Why does Putin want Europe at the negotiating table? And what about Ukraine? You know, the country that they invaded. Why is Ukraine not being invited to these talks? I think that would be pretty important. If you're going to be discussing their country, the future of their country, why are they not there? Anyway, and then this is where it starts to get a bit weird. It is perfectly sensible to keep Europe out of negotiations. Given how ridiculous it has been throughout this conflict, doing everything it can to derail peace and trick the public into thinking war is unavoidable. I'm looking at you, Boris Johnson. Oh no, this guy. Oh no. Oh, this guy thinks that Boris Johnson torpedoed a deal. Does he also think that Boris Johnson led a commando raid on Russian forces? Because that is also part of the Russian propaganda, my friend. Do you believe that as well? Yeah, I'm just shocked. I don't even know what to say about that. They were not acting ridiculous at all. They were very, very concerned about what was going on here, because if he goes into Ukraine and takes Ukraine, and there's no security guarantees, what's to stop him coming back and taking more of Ukraine later down the line when he has weakened Ukraine through these negotiation processes? Because we know one of the things that Russia is still asking for is a massive reduction in Ukraine's armed forces and their capability to fight back against a potential future Russian invasion. Oh, Europe is just, acting completely ridiculous on this. Anyway, Europeans are saying it's not Trump's place to negotiate with Russia, but suddenly it is theirs. No, they are saying that one of the things they are definitely saying, it is Ukraine's place to negotiate. And one of the reasons why they are at the table is because they want to find out what's going on. They are not liking the fact that Ukraine has been cut out of these negotiations, and that these negotiations that take place. So they are trying to use their leverage to get into these negotiations to find out what is going on, so that they can potentially object to anything that might be bad. But again, this guy doesn't seem to understand that. Anyway, you can argue all you like, it's not Trump's place to negotiate. But Trump could argue it is not the place to arm one of the parties in the conflict. Why wouldn't it be his argument to arm one of the parties in the conflict? Your US was supporting Ukraine so that they wouldn't get invaded. This Trump can't make any decision, of course, for Ukraine, but Ukraine doesn't. The Ukraine doesn't agree to a peace deal. He doesn't have to continue arming it. See how it works. That means that Donald Trump can force Ukraine into accepting a peace they do not want. Why is that fair? Why should they be put into giving in a position of giving up territory that they have fought and bled for to defend to reward Putin. This is appeasement. This is appeasement fully and foremost on here. This is an appeasement argument. This is unbelievable, but here you go. Anyway, while I agree with Trump's push for peace, again, peace at any price, right? I certainly don't see him as a savior for the Ukrainian people. His motives are, of course, far from noble. He wants Ukraine's rare earth materials, but the only thing that sets him apart from Biden is that he is honest about his looting plans. Looting Ukraine was always one of the empire's objectives. So we shouldn't support anything on that case then. We should just abandon Ukraine for that reason. Oh, America's going to loot it. So, well, that's it. Anyway, Trump, like Putin, of course, is no anti-imperialist hero. His mission on Gaza, for example, is horrific, but the idea that Trump is wrong to end brinkmanship with Russia and cut back imperialism is absurd. It depends what the consequences for that are going to be. If Putin thinks under Trump he can get away with further stuff, do you not think he's going to go forward and do it? Why are you not a country that has a border with Russia not looking at this and going, it doesn't matter that we might hold back Russia, that we might stop them taking territory, because eventually someone like Trump will come in, cut us out of any peace deal, and negotiate an end to this war that is not on our favorable terms or is fair to us, but gives the enemy opposing side everything it could ask for. Like, I can't see how he does not see that, or does not seem to understand that argument or get where that is coming from. So the neoliberals have yet again pivoted from Putin is losing badly to Putin is going to conquer all of Europe unless we start World War III first. They just can't make up their minds up. No one is saying that at all. She's not going to conquer all of Europe. However, there are certain, shall we say, countries in Europe he would absolutely like to get back into sphere and influence and take control of. The Baltic states, almost certainly, and of course, certainly parts of Poland. That is also sure as well. It's not all of Europe he is after. But if also he can, so we say, further fragment Europe, break up further alliances, and basically use the Russian military to bully, cajole other European countries, he absolutely will. So that is not any position I've ever seen anyone say or anything like that. And is Putin losing badly? He's not doing too good considering the amount of troops he's losing. So he's certainly not winning, but he's certainly not losing either at the moment. But the Ukrainians are putting up a absolutely stellar fight, and to abandon them now would be a betrayal of proportions I think we cannot fathom. And the consequences of that betrayal will have further consequences down the line. If you can see the West is committing to genocide in Gaza, but you think it is motivations for Ukraine are freedom and democracy, I honestly don't know what to say about it. Ukraine has freedom and democracy, is currently fighting for that freedom and democracy. I don't know what that says about you, to be honest. Anyway, our government cares as much about Ukrainians as it does about the Palestinians. I'm begging you to stop swallowing this imperialist propaganda, especially if you're finding yourself nowadays nodding along to Julia Hart-Brewer. This conversation. To be honest, Julia Hart-Brewer actually did a good job on that. She did a good job challenging Richard Trice on this. The Talk TV host had a run-in, of course, with Richard Trice, where she challenged him on Trump's eagerness now to push for peace in Ukraine, and neoliberals were suddenly like, I agree with Julia Hart-Brewer. No shit, that's because you're both imperialists. No, you're not. You don't have to agree with what Julia Hart-Brewer taking him to task for that, you do not suddenly become an imperialist. Anyway, Hartbrewer insisted war stop when one side is defeated, ignoring that almost every war ends in a negotiated settlement and that war is only going to have one winner, Russia. Yeah, if they win. If they win. Not every war ends in negotiated settlement. One side does win in wars. Vast majority of the time, they get to dictate what those terms are. And currently, Russia is acting like these negotiations that have happened are basically their victory terms, and that they are the winner in this conflict, and they get to dictate whatever terms they want. That is concerning, especially for the rest of Europe, especially if you are a country that is next to, Russia. Kind of worrying. Kind of very worrying on that. So, Hartley Brewer's argument wasn't that it doesn't count as a negotiation if you're going to give up everything Putin wants. This is interesting because imperialists have been telling us Putin wants all of Ukraine and all of Europe, none of which is on offer. He doesn't. No one is making that argument, my friend. That is an argument that you are straw manning. That is a straw man position of that argument. And yet, Putin would love to get all of Ukraine back. Is he capable of doing that? No. So what he wants to do is to put Ukraine into a position where he can basically shadow puppet control it, pretty much like he does Belarus. That is what he would like to do to Ukraine. And then eventually, over time, Russia will annex it. Just like, what's going to happen to Belarus eventually. So, she said, which part of Britain would you give away if it were invaded? Hartley Brewer shrieked. In the situation here is, of course, a little different. We're talking about Putin keeping, I like it, a sliver of Ukraine. That is 20%, 40% of their territory. 40%, it's not a sliver, it's 40% of the territory. Let's be real about the territory they are asking for. And these keyboard warriors hadn't even heard of just a few years ago. A sliver of Ukraine that hadn't been at civil war with Western Ukraine for 8 years because it wants independence. Really did it want independence? Really did it want independence? That's certainly a massive red flag right there. There is no evidence that these territories wanted independence. There has been lots of evidence clearly cited that every single moment these people who were fighting for, quote, independence were actually Russians, or Russian soldiers disguised as these, quote, freedom fighters wanting independence. Russia came in at every single opportunity, supported them. Where did they get all these weapons from all of a sudden to do this? Why, of course, did, for example, in Kherson, when these people also turned up, they were pushed out there, because the Ukrainians very quickly realized, oh, these people are not on, and they were pushed out. They were losing that civil war. Part of the reason why this entire war started to begin with was because they were losing that war and that they wanted to pursue it and that they wanted to take these territory, that they wanted that territory. And now they've taken even more territory than their original objectives have even stated. So again, Russia has gone for one territory and then it has pushed for more territory. At what point do you say no more? Like, I seriously have to ask that question. Because this guy would gladly give all away for Ukraine for peace, but at what cost would that be to the Ukrainian people, who have time and time again said, we do not want to be part of Russia, we do not want to have anything to do with Russia, we want to be more European. Isn't that a betrayal of what the Ukrainian people want? Anyway, Peace negotiations must reflect the realities on the battlefield. Like it or not, Ukraine is losing badly. It's not losing badly at all. If you keep fighting now for unachievable goals, all you're going to do is kill more Ukrainians. You're also going to kill a lot of Russians in that process as well. But our leaders don't care about them, and their tears are just performative. Yeah, again, you don't really seem to care about how well the Ukrainians have actually done in this war, constantly defying every single odds on that. So that is a very, very poor estimate to how the Ukrainians have actually done in this war. Personally, I value human life more than lines on the map, because once you're dead, there is no coming back. Well, what about all those people that suddenly end up on that other line? All those Ukrainians in occupied territory, what's going to happen to them? What about all those Ukrainians that the homes are now suddenly on that other side? They're not going to get the right to return. Putin's not going to allow them to come back in. That is going to create a massive humanitarian crisis. So you just said you care about human life. That's performative tears right there, my friend. The Ukrainian people, of course, don't want war. A majority want a negotiated settlement, according to Gallup. Again, you're misrepresenting that Gallup poll right there. The Ukrainian army is having to kidnap men from the streets because it can't recruit. Please cite that source. Please cite that source, quote, having to kidnap men from the streets because it can't recruit. Please cite that source. One of the things most likely to put a stop to this insanity is that Europe is not in a position to fight. Germany, in particular, is now less equipped to fight a war than it was at the start, because it has given so much of equipment to Ukraine. I'm guessing that many other European countries are now in a similar position. So basically, oh yeah, we're in a weak position, we shouldn't fight. And that Putin basically gets to claim his victory. And basically has shown, well, actually, Europe is quite in easy pickings. If I want to go for, some of those other European countries, I'd like, guess there is, a lot more of European places on his shopping list that he would like to go for. Isn't there? Anyway, while Putin is incapable of conquering Europe, he's certainly capable of inflicting mass casualties and then getting a ton of concessions, potentially in that negotiations. A wider war would, of course, favor no country except his, but unfortunately, Starmer now seems very horny for war. He's doing his, quote, Churchillian thing about being once in a generation moment in his existential matter now for Europe. It absolutely is an existential matter for Europe, because what does Putin do next? Now he's got this. What does he go next? Does he go back into Ukraine for more? Does he go into Georgia? Does he go into Moldova? Does he test NATO in Article 5 on this? There are so many, scenarios that could happen by doing this. So many. And then it's where's the line? Where's the line? If it is peace at any cost, at what point do you say no more? Where's the line? Because we did this in the lead up to World War II, hoping that this would appease, a certain mustachioed individual. Turned out not to be the case. Even another, shall we say, certain Russian mustachioed individual, territorial concessions didn't really seem to appease him either. And he's getting aroused by, of course, the possibility of there being a leader who goes down in history that will most likely be remembered as the guy who tried and failed to start a war to boost his poll ratings. That is completely ridiculous to say that. This isn't about boosting poll ratings at all. It is about Europe and the fate of Europe, and the fact that we could now basically be subject to Russian bullying at any time we want. Anyway, the British Prime Minister has been saying that Ukraine will join NATO, while the US insists that will never happen. Has been expressing now its reluctance to accept peace by saying, we must be very clear that peace cannot come at any cost. Ukraine must be at the table to put these at these negotiations, because anything less would accept Putin's position that Ukraine is not a real nation. Where is the energy when it comes to Gaza, please? Again, why bring up Gaza? Why not just tackle that statement as is? Instead, why just randomly throw in Gaza? Again, I'm sorry, but you're bad at foreign policy. You're bad at this. Your comments do not do you any service or any favors. This is appeasement. This is what we've probably been seeing about someone saying, "Yeah, just give up the Sudeten land. It's fine. He won't take any more." Right, right. No, respond to that comment. Don't just say, "Oh well, what about Gaza?" Respond to that comment. There has just been a quote security conference in Munich, where another one, of course, is currently starting in Paris, and even the BBC is suggesting that it could spell the end of NATO. Yes, it does look like that. Could spell the end of NATO, or at least American involvement in NATO. Everyone in Europe is panicking because they think that Europe is now being left helpless, but there is no reason for this to be the case. A landmass with 3 to 4 billion people, some of it the most skills arm manufacturers in the world, and more wealth capacity than anywhere else, is now capable of defending itself. Is it? Do you want to put that to the test? Because going your way, you are suddenly so sure that Putin's not going to test that. Do you really want to roll the dice on that? Because I don't. War is more likely under your scenario than it is ours. That if we do not stand up and if we are not tough now and we do not lay down red lines, how far is Putin then willing to go? Because I'll tell you what, Putin has put down red lines during this war, and the Ukrainians have crossed them every single time. Nuclear war hasn't broken out like Putin promised it would. So we've pushed back his red lines many, many times, and you are willing to concede who knows how much influence and territory over this. Anyway, how about we give up our ridiculous imperialist ambitions? Again, our own imperialist ambitions. Where we're not saying we don't want to take over Ukraine, and instead turn our continent into a fortress. The message of every country should be: we won't mess with you, but don't you dare mess with us. Wait. What? Why is that a deterrent? Why is that a deterrent? Should every country have nuclear weapons? Then are you saying that every country in Europe should now be acquiring nuclear weapons? Because that's bad. That's very, very bad. Putin has zero incentive to attack Europe. Yeah. Putin has 0% guys to attack Europe. He's not stated during this war goals to reclaiming territory in Europe, noticeably the Baltic states and in and around Poland. Jesus, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about this. We would have no hope, of course. He would have no hope, of course, controlling Europe. He would if he had sort of, his military and just, putting down, again, civil uprisings using proxy governments to do it, sort of like, the Soviet Union did back then. Anyway, and starting a wider war would now only hurt his popularity at home. No, it wouldn't. This war hasn't really hurt his popularity at home either, thanks to his control of propaganda in Russia. Sadly, neoliberals are now incapable of seeing the reality, but instead they only see things in terms of the ironies laid out by the propagandists. Well, I would say to you, you seem to be suffering from your own state of that, but there you go. This is a battle now of good versus evil, you see. The fact that the goodies have spent a year and a half now committing to genocide is neither. Why again do we have to bring in Gaza to talk about the situation? Gaza has nothing to do with this Ukraine situation whatsoever. Just remove it from your mind. Our rulers, of course, would never lie to us over something like war. This is why we should be censoring us whenever we disagree with them. Then going to some of Iraq, Afghanistan, again, take the situation for the situation that it is. Don't bring in any other outlying sort of reason for it, right? The situation is as it is. Why not respond to the situation as it is? Why do you have to constantly bring in other things because you think you make a larger point when some of that stuff does not apply to Ukraine? Anyway, one thing has at least come out of the Munich conference is that neoliberals upset JD Vance called Europe out of its authoritarian direction and attacks on free speech. And while they are right to point out his hypocrisy, he is right to point out theirs. You lot are awful. So, do you agree then with JD Vance on Romania was wrong to cancel an election because it found that there was significant Russian interference on this? Anyway, former British Prime Minister John Major said that the opponents of Putin fall out of windows, but he did fail to mention what we've done to journalists in Gaza. Again, why? You know, anyone who was opposing Putin literally just, well, you know, shoved out a window. And that gains him more power, money, and influence. Yeah, it's bad to see what has happened to many of the journalists in Gaza, but Gaza's an entirely separate situation to what's going on in Ukraine. The center now is only capable of recognizing these things when people they don't like do them. And we pretend that we have free press in the UK. We see no divergence of opinion when it comes to matters like Ukraine because everyone is pretty much in agreement on this, except for, I don't know, I'm going to call you a tanky because you do seem to be coming across like a massive tanky. Tankies like you who seem to think that Russia isn't in the wrong, that Russia is right to do its actions. And if, well, Russia does invade someone and, you know, it takes territory, well, it should get that territory as a reward for its invasion, that it shouldn't be punished and for doing these types of things. And that any further security guarantees to maybe stop Russia doing this in the future, well, we can't really. Sorry. This is just so bad. So bad on this. And it continues. Well, it's not long to finish now. But this is really, oh god, I can already see he's talking about CIA and involvement. Oh god, this is do I even bother finishing off, especially when he's bringing up the Victoria Newland call here about the CIA and MI6 waging a covert war in Russia in 2014. I just don't even want to finish it at that point. I just don't even want to finish it. I've spent enough time on that tanky doofus. But yeah, that was bad. That is incredibly bad. That amounts to well, who cares what happens in another foreign country? Oh, another bigger country is picking on a smaller country. Well, guess what? You should be, you know, adhering to the rule of you don't mess with us, we won't mess with you. So we're not going to get involved and maybe stop that country from being annexed. And oh, look, you're going after another country. Well, like I say, you're not messing with us, so we won't mess with you. It's might makes right. That is, to sum that all up, that is a might makes right world-based order, an order that we agreed after World War II we should not see continued. And yet you are advocating for that. I just don't know what else to say to that. That is bad. That is aged like milk. That is some terrible arguments. He's saying stuff there that he cannot back up. In some of that stuff, is hyperbole. Some of the stuff he said, that is insane. That literally that is an insane blog written by what I can only be described as a tanky. And I think this guy thinks again. I don't even have to say. I think this guy thinks Russia was right to invade Ukraine. I think if you asked him straight away, I think he would say that. So yeah, that's a tanky right there. I should have just said it right from the go, but no, that's definitely tanky. So as always, let me know what you think down below, and as always, we'll see you all next time.